3 in the morning, and you're staring at the dark ceiling as your mind races in 1,000 directions at once, thoughts running over each other like runaway cars on an endless highway. You know you need to sleep, that tomorrow will be a long and cruel day if you can't rest now. But the more you try to force sleep, the more awake you become. The more you order your mind to shut up, the louder the thoughts scream. And in that silent desperation of 3 in the morning, you begin to understand something that Simone Weil discovered in a way that almost destroyed. Your mind is not your friend. It is an uncontrolled machine that learned to run empty, consuming you from the inside out. And you spent so much time trying to control it that you forgot that there is a completely different way of relating to this incessant whirlwind of thoughts. There is a type of insomnia that is just physical tiredness. You drank too much coffee. You are stressed about work. You ate heavily before bed. But there is another type of insomnia, the type that Simone Weil knew intimately, that has nothing to do with caffeine or superficial stress. It is the insomnia of a mind that cannot stop processing, analyzing, trying to solve problems that have no solution at 3 in the morning. It is the insomnia of someone who has forgotten how to simply exist without constantly doing something, even if that something is just thinking compulsively. Have you ever noticed how impossible it is to force sleep? The more you try, the more it escapes. It's like trying to hold water with your hands closed. The more you squeeze, the more it runs through your fingers. And this frustrating inability to control something as basic as sleep itself reveals a brutal truth that most of us spend our entire lives avoiding. You don't control your mind as much as you think you do. Your mind is like a dog that has never been trained, running wild everywhere, digging holes where it shouldn't, barking at imaginary shadows, and you've become so used to this chaotic behavior that you've started to believe that this is how minds work, that it's normal to live with this constant noise, this incessant hustle and bustle that never, ever stops. Simone Weil, a French philosopher who lived only 34 years but delved deeper into the nature of the human mind than most manage in a lifetime, didn't write self-help manuals or quick guides to better sleep. She wrote about something much more radical and much truer: the practice of mindfulness as the only real way to silence the internal noise that consumes us. And what she discovered is not technique. It is fundamental change in the way you relate to your own consciousness. And if you feel that these words are touching something inside of you, something you can barely name but deeply recognize, so subscribe to this channel now, because let's explore together not just how to sleep better, but how to finally make peace with your own mind, how to stop being held hostage by the thoughts that spin endlessly, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Because what Simone Weil discovered about attention, silence, and the nature of consciousness will completely change the way you experience not just your sleepless nights, but every moment of your waking life. So let's start by naming exactly what's happening when you can't sleep. It's not just that your mind is busy. It's just that you've completely lost the ability to be present without doing something. You no longer know how to simply be. Your entire existence has become a constant project, an endless race from task to task, thought to thought, worry to worry, and even when your body is exhausted, crying out for rest, your mind continues operating in the mode of doing, of solving, of planning, of analyzing. Because doing has become your only way of existing, and the idea of simply being, of existing without purpose or direction, terrifies you in a way that you can barely admit to yourself. Simone Weil called this the tyranny of doing, the modern compulsion to transform every moment into production, every silence into a problem to be filled, every void into a gap to be filled with more thought, more activity, more noise. And at 3 in the morning, when there is nothing left to do, when all external distractions have been exhausted, you finally come face to face with what you have spent all day avoiding: yourself, naked and raw, without the armor of tasks and occupations. And it is terrifying because you realize that you don't know who you are when you are doing nothing. You have no idea how to inhabit your own existence without a project, without a problem to solve, without something to achieve or complete. You have become a stranger to yourself, And that strangeness is what keeps you up night after night, because sleep requires surrender, requires letting go of control, requires trusting that you will still exist when you are not. You are actively holding everything together through willpower and constant thinking. And here's the part that no one tells you about chronic insomnia, about this inability to turn off your mind. It's not a problem that can be solved with quick tricks or techniques. It's not a question of finding the right pillow or the ideal room temperature or the perfect chamomile tea. These things may help superficially, but they don't touch the root of the problem, which is much deeper and much scarier. The root is that you have lost touch with the part of yourself that knows how to simply exist, the part that doesn't need to be always vigilant, always on guard, always processing and planning and preparing for the next challenge. You have lost access to what Weil called the part of the soul that can simply be, without needing to justify its existence through productivity or thought or any form of activity. And this loss did not happen suddenly. It was gradual, almost imperceptible, over years of conditioning to value doing over being, producing over existing, efficiency over presence. You have been trained, since you were a child, to measure your worth by what you can accomplish, by the problems you solve, by the goals you achieve. And at no point has anyone taught you that there is infinite value in the simple act of being alive, of breathing, of existing without a purpose beyond your own existence. So you grew up building an entire identity based on doing, on achieving, on always being one step ahead, always planning, always preparing, and now, at 3 a.m, when there's nothing left to do or achieve or plan, you have no idea who you are or how to simply be. Simone Weil knew this agony intimately. She had suffered from devastating headaches since she was a teenager, pains so intense they often prevented her from sleeping, from thinking, from functioning. But it wasn't just the physical pain that kept her awake. It was his own mind, brilliant and relentless, always spinning, always analyzing, always seeking to understand more, to go deeper, to see more clearly. Weil couldn't turn off her mind because her mind was too sharp an instrument, too precise a tool that she had developed through years of intense study, of rigorous questioning, of tireless search for truth. And this tool that was supposed to free her became her prison, because a mind trained to never stop, to always question, to constantly analyze, doesn't know how to simply rest. It's like an elite athlete who has trained so much that they can no longer relax their muscles. They are always tense, always ready, always in a state of readiness that eventually becomes chronic exhaustion. Weil's mind was like that. And yours probably is too, only you've never had the language to name it, never been allowed to recognize that what keeps you awake is not your weakness or failure, but a direct result of living in a world that values constant thought above all else. And the more you fight insomnia, the more you try to force your mind to shut up, the more power you give it. It's a cruel paradox that Weil deeply understood. Resistance creates persistence. When you tell your mind to stop thinking, you are using your mind to fight the mind. You are thinking about not thinking, and this only creates more layers of mental activity, more turmoil, more noise. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. The more you fight, the more the fire spreads. And you know it. You've experienced it hundreds of times, lying in bed and ordering yourself to sleep now, demanding the thoughts stop, becoming more and more frustrated and desperate as the minutes pass and sleep doesn't come, until you are so anxious and agitated that sleep has become completely impossible. Weil saw this trap with brutal clarity. She realized that you can't fight your mind using your mind. You can't think your way out of compulsive thinking. You need a completely different approach, something that goes against everything modern society teaches about control and willpower and self-mastery. So here's what Simone Weil discovered after years of sleepless nights. Headaches that wouldn't go away, a mind that couldn't rest. The secret isn't to silence the mind, it's to change your relationship with it. You don't need to make the thoughts stop, you need to stop being dragged by them. And this distinction may seem subtle, but it is the difference between continuing to be a hostage of your own conscience or finally finding peace in the midst of the turmoil? Well, developed a practice that she simply called attention. But attention, in her sense, is not what you think of when you hear that word. It is not forced concentration or intense focus. It is something much softer and much more radical. It is the ability to observe what is happening in your mind without becoming aware of it. Identify with it without letting yourself be swept away by the current of thoughts, without turning each thought into a story about who you are or what you need to do. Attention, for Weil, is like being on the bank of a river watching the water pass by, instead of being in the river being swept away by the current. And that changes everything, because when you learn to observe your thoughts without being your thoughts, when you can see the mental turmoil without being the turmoil, you discover that there is something in you bigger than your mind, deeper than your thoughts, something that can witness the chaos without being destroyed by it. But let's be honest, that sounds impossible when you're at 3 a.m, completely wrapped up in worries about tomorrow, replaying yesterday's conversations, planning strategies for next week, your mind racing in all directions at once. How are you supposed to observe this without being swept away when you are this, when your thoughts are all you know of yourself in this moment? And here is where Weil's teaching becomes practical, where philosophy meets lived experience. She is not asking you to achieve some heightened state of consciousness or to become a Zen master instantly. She is offering something much simpler and much more difficult, that you start by just noticing, just acknowledging that you are thinking. And every time you notice, you have created little space between yourself and the thought. This space is freedom. It's tiny at first, barely noticeable, but it's real. And every time you realize again, oh, I'm thinking again, I'm being dragged again, that space grows a little more. It's not about stopping the thoughts, it's about waking up repeatedly from the trance they create. It's about stopping the automatic identification with each thought that arises. So in practice, when you're lying in the dark and your mind won't stop, instead of fighting or despairing, you do something radically different. You simply notice. Ah, I'm thinking about work. You don't try to stop the thinking. You don't judge yourself for thinking about work at 3 a.m. You just recognize this is thinking about work, and by naming, you have already created distance. Ah, I'm replaying that difficult conversation. You observe as if you were watching from the outside. This is memory. This is my mind processing something that has already happened. Oh, I'm worrying about tomorrow. You recognize without drama. This is anxiety about the future. This is my mind trying to control what cannot be controlled now. And each time you do this, each time you break the trance and recognize that you are thinking, you exercise the attention muscle that Weil talked about. You practice being present instead of being lost. You learn the difference between being your mind and having a mind. And that difference, however subtle it may seem, is liberation. It's discovering that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who can observe thoughts. And that changes everything. But there is a deeper layer to all this, something that Simone Weil saw and that most people never notice because they are too busy trying to control or escape their minds. The brutal truth is this: your mind isn't just thinking randomly when you can't sleep. It's revealing exactly what you don't want to see during the day. It's bringing to the surface all the inconvenient truths that you've spent the last 12 or 15 hours avoiding through work, through distractions, through constant busyness. At 3 a.m, when all defenses are down, when you're too exhausted to keep your masks on, your mind finally shows you what's really going on beneath all the day's performance. The concerns that arise are not random. The fears that haunt you are not without reason. The anxiety that keeps you awake is trying to tell you something that you refuse to hear when you're busy being productive and functional. Will understood this deeply. She knew that insomnia is not just a technical problem with sleep hygiene or imbalanced brain chemistry. Insomnia is often a symptom of a life lived out of alignment with truth. A life where you are constantly suppressing parts of yourself that need to be heard, constantly pushing down feelings and perceptions that seem too inconvenient or scary to face in the light of day. So when your mind won't shut down at night, maybe the question isn't how to make it stop, but what is it trying to tell you that you don't want to hear? Maybe that obsessive worry about work isn't just meaningless anxiety. Maybe it's your soul screaming that you're on a path that isn't yours, doing things that don't matter, living a life that you didn't choose but just accepted because it seemed like the right path. Maybe that constant rumination about relationships isn't just neuroses. Maybe it's recognition deep feeling that something fundamental is wrong, something you don't want to admit because admitting it would mean having to change, having to face painful truths, having to make difficult choices. Perhaps this inability to rest is not your fault, but the deep wisdom of your body and soul refusing to rest in a life that is not true, in a situation that is not sustainable, in a persona that is not really you. Will would say that your insomnia is a form of truth trying to emerge, and you're fighting it because truth hurts. Truth demands change. Truth shatters the comfortable illusions you've built about who you are and what your life should be. And that takes us to the heart of what Weil was really teaching, which has nothing to do with relaxation techniques or tricks for better sleep, but something much more radical, the practice of decreation. Decreation, in Weil's vocabulary, is not destruction. It is not annihilating yourself or denying your existence. It's carefully peeling back all the false layers of identity you've built, all the stories you tell about who you are, all the roles you play, all the masks you wear, until you get to what's left when it's all stripped away. And what remains, she discovered, is nothing in the sense of dead emptiness, but nothing in the sense of open space, pure receptivity, presence that doesn't need to be anything specific to exist. Decreation is the process of letting go of the compulsive need to be someone, to prove something, to maintain a certain image of oneself, and simply allowing oneself to exist without all this weight. And when you practice this, when you start to let go of those layers of manufactured identity, something extraordinary happens. Your mind naturally starts to quiet down, because most of the mental turmoil is simply the ego trying to stay alive, trying to prove that it exists, trying to defend its narratives and justify its choices and plan how it will be perceived and protect its image. When you stop feeding it, when you stop giving energy to this never-ending project of maintaining a coherent and impressive self, the noise dies down. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped feeding the machine that creates the noise. So Weil is not offering you a technique to sleep better, she is offering you a path to a completely different life, a life where you are not a hostage of your own mind because you are no longer identified with the character that your mind is constantly trying to build and defend. And that sounds scary, I know, because if you're not that character, if you're not your achievements and your worries and your plans and your memories, then who are you? And Weil would say, you are exactly what you will discover when you stop trying to be something specific. You are the space of consciousness where everything happens. You are the pure attention that can observe thoughts without being thoughts. You are the presence that exists before and after and throughout the mental whirlwind. You are that which remains when everything else is removed. And discovering this is not an intellectual exercise. It is not an abstract philosophical understanding. It is a direct experience that only happens when you stop running away from the silence, when you finally have the courage to meet yourself without all the defenses and distractions. And yes, this usually happens at 3 a.m, when you have no choice left, when all escapes have been exhausted and you are face to face with your own naked conscience. But how do you actually do this? How do you practice this attention, this decreation, this letting go of manufactured identity, especially when you are exhausted and desperate for sleep and all you want is for your mind to finally shut up? Weil did not offer a step-by-step instruction manual because she knew that real transformation does not happen through formulas or mechanical techniques. But she left clues, practices that she developed in her own life, of suffering and insomnia and tireless search for truth. And of these practices, there is one that is the foundation of everything else, one that she returned to again and again, one that can completely change your experience of being awake in the middle of the night. The practice of waiting without waiting, of being present without an agenda, of observing without trying to change anything. It seems paradoxical, it seems impossible, but it is exactly this impossibility that breaks the vicious cycle. When you're in bed, mind racing, body tense, and instead of fighting or despairing, you simply decide, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be present for what's happening. I'm not going to try to do anything different than what's happening now. I won't try to sleep. I won't try to stop the thoughts. I won't try to feel different. I'm just going to be exactly as I am right now. And when you do that, when you stop fighting, something changes. Not immediately, not magically, but gradually you realize that resistance was what made everything unbearable. Insomnia itself is uncomfortable, but the fight against insomnia, the despair arrow from sleep, frustration with your own mind, that's what turns discomfort into agony. Then you practice what Weil called consent, which is not passive resignation, but active acceptance of what is. You consent to be awake now. Allow your mind to be active now. Allow this moment to be exactly as it is, not as you would like it to be. And in the act of consenting, you stop adding layers of suffering on top of the basic discomfort. You stop making up stories about how terrible it is to not be able to sleep, about how it will ruin your day tomorrow, about how broken or flawed you are for not being able to do something as simple as sleep. You are simply awake, watching thoughts pass by, feeling sensations in your body, listening to the sounds of the night, existing without an agenda or purpose. And sometimes, often even, when you stop trying to sleep, sleep comes. Because sleep is not something you can achieve through willpower. Sleep is surrender. It's letting go of control. It's trusting that your body knows what to do when you finally stop interfering. But before we explore more deeply how this practice transforms not just your nights but your entire existence, I need to pause and share something with you, because while we are here together exploring these truths about mind, sleep, and attention, there are thousands of other people around the world watching this same video right now. People in São Paulo and Lisbon, in Luanda and Maputo, in New York and Tokyo, all searching for the same answers, all struggling with their own minds that won't turn off. And there is something profoundly beautiful and powerful about knowing that we are not alone. In this, so I would like to ask you now, leave a comment below saying where you are watching from, what city, what country, what time it is where you are. Because when we do this, when we share our location and our present moment, we create something bigger than just visualizations. We create community of real people who are awake in different time zones but connected by the same quest to understand and make peace with their own minds. And maybe Simone Weil, wherever she is now, would be smiling to see how her words continue to find those in need. Listen to them, crossing decades and oceans and different languages to touch exactly the wound that needs to be touched. So tell me, where are you watching from and what brought you here? And now let's dive even deeper into what happens when you finally stop fighting your own conscience. Because here's what Weil discovered that goes beyond simply getting better sleep. When you develop the ability to be present to the mental turmoil without being swept away by it, when you learn to observe thoughts as phenomena that come and go rather than absolute truths about reality, you don't just solve the problem of insomnia. You fundamentally transform your relationship with suffering, with anxiety, with fear, with the entire human experience. You discover that you can be in the midst of the mental storm and remain whole. You can be facing terrifying thoughts about the future and recognize them as just thoughts. You can be feeling intense emotions and observing them without being destroyed by them. And this discovery, this recognition that you are not your thoughts or your emotions, but the consciousness that observes them, is a portal to freedom that most people never experience because they are so completely identified with the content of their minds that they cannot see that there is a dimension of themselves beyond that content. Will experience this freedom in such a radical way that it scared the people around him. She could be in the midst of devastating physical pain, of profound existential uncertainty, of suffering that would break most people, and still maintain clarity, still think with precision, still observe her own experience with pure attention. Not because she was superhuman or had any special gift, but because she tirelessly practiced the art of not being her experience, of being the witness to her experience. And you can practice this starting today Starting tonight, starting the next moment, your mind starts racing and you find yourself being swept up in the whirlwind. You stop, breathe, and ask, who is watching these thoughts? Who is aware of what I'm thinking? And in the question, you have already created distance. You have already woken up from the trance. You don't need to answer the question intellectually. You just feel the presence of something in you that is aware of the thoughts, but is not the thoughts. This presence does not think, it observes. She doesn't judge, she witnesses. She doesn't fight, she allows. And the more you return to that presence, the more familiar you become with that dimension of yourself that is always calm. Even when everything else is in chaos, the more you discover that the peace you were seeking through sleep, through silencing the mind, through any technique or strategy, was always available, always accessible, because it is not a state you need to create, but a reality you need to recognize. Well would say that this presence is what she called the highest part of the soul, the part that touches infinity, the part that cannot be touched by suffering because it is not at the level where suffering happens. It is a dimension above, observing everything with compassion, but without being diminished by anything. So when you're lying in bed at 3 a.m, instead of fighting or despairing, you can do something completely different. You can recognize that this is an opportunity to practice, to develop this ability to be present with what's difficult without being destroyed by it. Your insomnia becomes your teacher, not your enemy. Your restless mind becomes a training ground, not a problem to be eliminated. And you begin to see that the goal was never to make your mind stop or to sleep perfectly every night. The goal was to develop the ability to be okay even when things are not how you want them to be. To find peace not through controlling circumstances, but through changing your relationship with circumstances. Well learned this the hard way possible, through years of physical pain that didn't go away, internal conflicts that couldn't be resolved, questions that didn't have easy answers. And what she discovered was not a cure for pain or a solution to conflict or answers to questions, but something far more valuable. She discovered how to inhabit her own life completely, how to be fully present even in the midst of suffering, how to love her existence not despite the difficulties, but including the difficulties, because they are an inseparable part of being alive, of being human, of having consciousness that can question and feel and suffer, and, paradoxically, through this accepted suffering, transcend suffering itself. And here's something few realize about Weil's teaching. She's not asking you to torture yourself or value suffering for its own sake. She's pointing out that when you stop running away from the inevitable discomfort of existence, when you finally allow it to be difficult without adding layers of resistance and drama on top of the basic difficulty, you discover that you can carry so much more than you thought you were capable of. Your sleepless nights, however uncomfortable they may be, won't break you if you stop fighting them. Your restless mind, as frustrating as it may be, is not a sign that something is fundamentally wrong with you. It's simply how human minds work when they haven't been trained, when they haven't developed the capacity for pure attention, when they haven't learned the difference between thinking when it's useful and thinking compulsively because they don't know how to do anything else. And you can learn. It's not quick, it's not easy, but it is possible. Will proved it is possible. And thousands of people over the centuries, practicing similar forms of mindfulness in different traditions and contexts, have proven that it is possible. You don't need to be special or enlightened or have some rare gift. You just have to be willing to practice, to return to observation again and again when you find yourself lost in thought, to be kind to yourself when you fail, because you will fail constantly at first, and to keep practicing anyway. And let's be completely honest about what happens when you start this practice. It's not instantaneous transformation. It's not like the first night you try to observe your thoughts instead of fighting them. Suddenly everything becomes calm and you fall asleep in deep peace. That would be nice, but it's rarely like that. More likely is that you will try to observe. You will get lost in thought 30 seconds later. You will realize that you have lost it and judge yourself for it. You will try again. You will get lost again, and you will spend the whole night oscillating between observation and identification, between presence and trance. And you will wake up in the morning, still tired, maybe even more frustrated, because now you have a practice that is supposed to help, and it didn't solve the problem immediately. And here's where most people give up. Because we are so conditioned to look for quick solutions, immediate results, magical transformations, that when something requires consistent practice over time, patience with a slow process, tolerance for repeated failures, we decide it doesn't work and go back to looking for the next miracle technique. But Weil would tell you that exactly this impatience, this demand for immediate results, this refusal to accept that real transformation takes time, is part of the problem. It is a manifestation of the same mind oriented to do and achieve that keeps you awake in the first place. So the real challenge is not technique itself. It is not observing people's thoughts or practicing mindfulness or anything specific you do. The real challenge is to develop patience, compassion, and persistence with yourself as you learn. It's about keeping coming back to practice night after night, even when it doesn't seem like it's working. It's recognizing small victories, those 2-second moments where you manage to observe a thought without being swept away by it, and celebrating that instead of focusing on all the other moments where you failed. It's understanding that every time you realize you've lost your way and return to observation, you are strengthening your attention muscle, even if you don't feel an immediate difference. It's trusting the process even when results are not obvious. And that's hard, incredibly hard, because it goes against everything you've been taught about how change works. But that's how real change works. Not through dramatic and sudden transformations, but through small choices repeated thousands of times, each one building on the previous one, until one day you realize that something fundamental has changed without you having noticed when exactly it happened. And what changes eventually is not that your mind stops thinking, or that you never have a rough night again, or that insomnia magically disappears. What changes is that you are no longer at war with your own experience. You have developed the ability to be with what is, even when what is not what you want. You can be awake at 3 a.m. and not be panicking about it. You may notice anxious thoughts arising and recognize them as thoughts rather than truths. You can feel discomfort without turning it into suffering through resistance and drama. And this ability extends far beyond sleepless nights. It changes how you deal with everything difficult in your life. How you respond to stress, how you find peace in the midst of chaos, how you maintain your sanity in a world that is constantly pulling you in 1,000 different directions. Weil discovered that pure attention is not just a technique for dealing with compulsive thoughts, it is a fundamental form of love. It is how you love reality as it is instead of how you wish it were. It is how you love yourself completely, including the parts that are difficult and broken and will never be perfect. So what Simone Weil is really teaching you through her concept of mindfulness is not a trick to sleep better, but a way to live better, to exist with more integrity, to be present in your own life instead of constantly running away from it. And yes, this will help you sleep eventually, because when you are no longer at war with your mind, when you have developed the ability to be present without an agenda, your nervous system naturally calms down. Your body learns that it is safe to relax. Your mind discovers that it does not need to be always vigilant because you are no longer identified with every thought that arises. You know that thoughts are just passing phenomena and you are that which remains. But better sleep is almost a side effect, an added bonus. The real prize is discovering that you can inhabit your own consciousness without fear, that you can be alone with yourself without needing constant distraction, that you can face difficult truths about your life without falling apart, that you can feel intense emotions without being destroyed by them, that you can live fully even in the midst of circumstances that are not perfect, that you can find peace not through controlling everything, but through accepting what cannot be controlled and working wisely with what you can. And now, having walked this journey together from the agony of not being able to sleep to the radical possibility of transforming your relationship with your own mind, there remains one final piece of Weil's teaching that needs to be named. Something she discovered only in the last few years of her short life, but which encapsulates everything we are exploring here. Will realized that deep, very deep, beneath all the thoughts and worries and fears that keep you awake, there is a primal fear that we rarely admit even to ourselves. The fear of being nothing, of discovering that when you strip away all the layers of identity and performance and compulsive thinking, there is nothing there, just emptiness, just absence, just nothing. And this fear is what feeds the compulsive need to always be doing something, always be thinking something, always be someone specific, because stopping would mean risking finding that void and discovering that you don't exist in the way you thought you did. So you fill every moment with activity, with noise, with thought, not because these things are necessary, but because the silence terrifies you, the emptiness threatens you, the possibility of not being anyone special is unbearable. But Weil discovered something extraordinary about that void we fear. When you finally have the courage to look directly into it, when you stop thinking about it, and run away and allow yourself to fully feel the terror of being nothing special, something paradoxical happens. Emptiness does not destroy you. He sets you free. Because emptiness reveals that you were carrying the impossible weight of having to be someone specific, of having to maintain a certain identity, of having to prove your worth through achievements and performance and constant thinking. And when you let go of all this, when you allow yourself to be nothing, you discover that nothing is not absence but pure presence. It is not death but life fuller than you imagined possible. It is not the end but the beginning of a way of existing that does not depend on you holding everything together through willpower. Well, called this successful decreation, this moment where you die to the fabricated self and discover that what remains is so much more real and so much vaster than whatever limited identity you were trying to maintain. And this is not a mystical experience reserved for saints or mystics. It is a possibility available to anyone willing to look directly at what they are afraid to see. And let's bring this back to where we started, to you lying in the dark at 3 a.m, mind racing, body exhausted but unable to rest. Now you can see that what's going on isn't just a problem with sleep hygiene or brain chemistry. It's an invitation. It's an opportunity. It's your conscience forcing you to face what you avoid during the day when you're busy and distracted. Your insomnia is telling you, look, pay attention, stop running away. And you can keep resisting. You can keep fighting. You can keep looking for the next technique or medicine or solution that will make the problem go away. Or you can do what Simone Weil did, what she invites you to do through her example and her writings. You can stop fighting. You can allow yourself to be completely present to what is happening. You can observe your mind with curiosity rather than judgment. You can recognize thoughts as thoughts rather than truths. You can let go of the need to be someone specific or to have it all figured out. You can simply exist in this moment exactly as you are, tired and awake and imperfect and human, and discover that this is enough, that you are enough, that you are not enough. It needs nothing more than its own honest presence to what it is. And when you do that, when you stop adding layers of suffering on top of the basic discomfort of being awake, when you stop creating stories about how terrible this is or how much it will ruin your day tomorrow, when you are simply here now with no agenda or expectation, something loosens. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped resisting. And sometimes sleep comes, soft and unexpected, just when you've stopped chasing it. And sometimes you stay up all night but discover that you can be okay even when you're awake, that you can find peace even without sleep, that you can inhabit your own consciousness with dignity and presence even in circumstances you didn't choose. And both results are victory, because in both you learned something infinitely more valuable than techniques for better sleep. You learned how to be yourself, completely, without escape or resistance or the need to be different from what you are. So tonight, or tomorrow night, or the next time you find yourself awake when you wish you were asleep, remember Simone Weil, this small, fragile woman who bore more suffering in 34 years than most bear in a lifetime, and who despite this, or perhaps precisely because of it, found a way to be completely present to her own existence, to love reality as it is, to practice attention so pure that she transformed even her suffering into a portal to deeper truth. And if this video touched something in you, if you recognized your own struggle in the words I shared, if you felt that finally someone understands what it's like to be trapped in your own mind without being able to rest, then leave a like, because it shows me that these truths are reaching those who need them, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue this journey together, because there is much more to explore about how to live with more presence, more truth, more peace amidst the chaos of human existence. You don't have to do this alone. There's a community growing here of people who are choosing to look directly at what's difficult instead of running away, who are practicing being present even when it's uncomfortable, who are discovering that peace doesn't come from having everything figured out, but from accepting what can't be resolved and working wisely with what can. Simone Weil only lived 34 years, but each of those years was lived with an intensity and presence that most of us never experience because we are too busy running away from our own lives. She didn't sleep well, her mind didn't rest, her body ached constantly, and yet she managed to produce philosophical insights that continue to transform lives decades after his death. Because she learned to be fully present to what is, because she practiced pure attention until it became her fundamental way of existing, because she had the courage to look directly into the void we all fear and discover that on the other side of the void there is something infinitely more real than any manufactured identity we try to maintain. And you can learn this too, not instantly, not without effort, not without repeated failures, but you can. Starting today, starting tonight. Starting the next moment, your mind starts racing and you have a choice between fighting or observing, between resisting or allowing, between being your thoughts or being the thing that observes thoughts. The choice has always been yours. We'll just showed you that there is choice, that you are not a hostage of your own mind unless you choose to be, that there is a way of inhabiting your consciousness that is not war but peace, not struggle but acceptance, not control but presence. And that form is available to you now, not as a distant goal that you need to reach, but as a reality that you can recognize at any moment. You don't have to wait until you are wiser or stronger or more enlightened. You can start right where you are, exactly as you are, with all your imperfection and confusion and tiredness. Will would say that exactly this imperfection, this confusion, this tiredness are perfect starting points because they force you to be honest, to let go of pretensions, to recognize that you don't have everything figured out and never will. And that brutal honesty is the beginning of real wisdom, the beginning of real transformation, the beginning of a life lived with eyes completely open to the truth of who you are and what it means to be alive. So go, lie in the dark tonight, and when your mind begins its familiar whirl, instead of despairing, recognize this is an opportunity to practice, to learn, to grow. Observe your thoughts like watching clouds passing by. Name them gently. This is worry about work. This is anxiety about tomorrow. This is memory of yesterday. And each time you name, you are creating space. You are waking up from the trance. You are practicing the art of being present without being swept away. And if you get lost 1,000 times, that's okay. We'll got lost 1,000 times too. We all get lost. What matters is not how many times you get lost, but how many times you come back. How many times do you recognize, oh, I'm lost again, and gently, without judgment, return to observation. This is the practice. Simple but not easy. Deep but not complicated. Always available but requires courage to start. And as you practice, remember that you are not alone. Somewhere in the world, right now, someone else is awake, wrestling with their own mind, discovering the same truths that Weil discovered, practicing the same mindfulness that you are learning. And maybe this won't change anything concretely, but there is comfort in knowing that there are many of us, walking parallel paths, each dealing with their own version of the universal struggle of being conscious, of having a mind that thinks too much, of carrying the weight of existing in a world that never stops demanding that we be more than we are. Will knew this. She knew that no one goes on this journey alone, that we all need company in the dark, that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for another human being is simply acknowledge, I see you, I see your struggle, and it is real, and it is legitimate, and you are not wrong for feeling the way you do. So I see you, reader or viewer, who has made it this far, who has had the patience and courage to explore these deep and difficult truths with me. I see you in your sleepless nights, in your mind that doesn't rest, in your tiredness that goes beyond the physical, and I want you to know that you are not broken, you are not failing, you are not doing anything wrong. You are simply human, consciously human, and this is simultaneously your greatest difficulty and your greatest dignity. Simone Weil would understand you perfectly. She would recognize you as a companion on the journey she herself took, and she would tell you, as I tell you now, keep looking, keep practicing, keep coming back to presence. Not because it will solve everything, but because it is the only path that leads through suffering rather than away from it, and through is the only real way out. You will sleep better eventually, but more importantly, you will live better. You will inhabit your own life with more truth, more presence, more peace, and that's worth every hard night, every moment of practice, every time you have the courage to look at what you're afraid to see. Anything goes. Will proved his worth, and you will taste it too. Good evening and good practice. Good.